After the Canaanite princes fled into the fortified city of Megiddo, Thutmose III decided not to lay a siege to the city, but rather to go back to Egypt to raise more troops so he could come back and finish the job. But when he came back to Megiddo, he found out that the people inside the city were suffering from lack of food and water. So he built a camp around the city and started to blockade it. He then built a dam across the river nearby so no fresh water would flow into the city. He also stationed troops along the road between the two cities so no food could be brought into the city. No one was allowed to enter or leave Megiddo. This blockade would eventually turn the battle into a siege. But before we get into that, if you are new here, welcome to the channel where we bring you the craziest and most exciting moments from ancient history. Now back to the episode. The siege of Megiddo would last 7 months. And during that time, Thutmose III would not engage the Canaanites in battle, thinking that it would only cost him precious men for nothing. Instead, he would just let the people inside the city slowly die from hunger and thirst. Every day, the Egyptian pharaoh would walk around the city walls and call on the leaders of the Canaanites to surrender the city and give up. But they refused. They thought that the Egyptians would eventually get bored and go away, or that the Egyptians would eventually run out of supplies and depart from Megiddo, but neither of those things happened. On the contrary, Thutmose III was receiving supplies every day from Egypt, and when his supply lines got low, he simply built another camp near his troops and moved there with his men. He kept doing this throughout the siege so that he could keep the blockade going. Slowly, the people inside the city started to panic. They started to fight each other over pieces of bread, and some even resorted to cannibalism. Also, the bodies of the dead were left lying around in the streets because no one was there to bury them. Eventually, the smell of death and decay was so bad that it started to rain blood and pus. Finally, the people inside Megiddo realized that their doom was at hand. Their food and water were running out, and their only hope of survival was to surrender to the Egyptians. When the Canaanite princes heard this, they knew that they had lost the battle. They came out of their palaces and fell down at Thutmose III's feet and begged him for mercy. The Egyptian pharaoh accepted their surrender and allowed them to live. He also allowed the soldiers who had fought for the Canaanites to join the Egyptian army without giving up their weapons. As for the rest of the population, they were allowed to keep their lives if they surrendered peacefully. Those who tried to flee were killed. Now that Megiddo had fallen, Thutmose III could finally return to Egypt. He did so in a magnificent victory procession. His army was laden with immense spoils of war, including gold, silver, precious stones, artworks, and chariots. In fact, Thutmose III's chariot was pulled by 8 horses, each wearing golden ornaments. He rode in a golden boat on human shoulders. Such was the magnitude of the Egyptian victory. The Canaanite princes who had surrendered and lived marched in front of Thutmose III as tokens of submission. It was truly a sight to behold an empire at the peak of its power. In fact, some historians say that Thutmose III's return to Egypt in 1450 BCE was the greatest victory procession in the history of the ancient world. And upon his return, Thutmose III was greeted as a god. The people of Egypt loved him and celebrated him for his bravery and skill in war. They made statues of him and put them in all the important temples throughout the empire. And they also told stories about his victories to make sure that his deeds would never be forgotten, and he didn't disappoint them. He went on to conquer more lands and make Egypt even more powerful than before. But that, my friends, is a story for another day. As for this one, I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our future videos. Thanks for watching.